Good morning, everybody. We will call the November 15th, 2021 council work session to order. We finally have our entire team in place. I want to welcome John Jennings, our new city manager, and Mr. Margolis joined us for the last work session and council meeting, but it is great to have the entire team assembled. So welcome. Anything you'd like to say?
No, just that I am incredibly honored to be able to sit in this seat to work with a visionary and ambitious council and an incredible staff. This is 1 week to the day, and so I do not suppose that I know everything yet, and nor will I ever, but I am going to lean on a terrific group and have been for the last week. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. We look forward to working with you. Mr. Maxwell is going to be reading the items this morning, and Mr. Jennings observing. And so, item 2.1.
Provide direction on Clearwater 2045 comprehensive plan update. Mr. Brotherton.
Thank you. Good morning, Kyle Brotherton, Planning and Development. So I'm going to introduce our presentation for you this morning. So as you are aware, we have started our updating process for our comprehensive plan, which is the guiding document of the city. We've named the project Clearwater 2045 as we aim to plan for the next 20 years into the future. And just as a refresher, we have contracted with HDR Inc. and SB Friedman Development Advisors to assist with us in this update. As you know, changes to the statutes have greatly allowed us freedom and flexibility in how we update our comprehensive plan. Previous rules are very prescriptive and led to a lot of redundancies. So with this update, we're looking to remove those redundancies and provide a more friendly, user-friendly document that everyone can use, boards, elected officials, everyone. So this project is vitally important as it does set forth those goals, policies, and objectives to guide future development, redevelopment, and capital spending within the city. We're currently about halfway through this 2-year project. Our anticipated completion is in fall of 2022. And the following presentation, which will be about 30 minutes long, but it does set forth the foundation for updating those goals, objectives, and policies. And the presentation will really detail what we've learned through our data and analysis and through what we've heard through our community outreach. And those community outreach engagement efforts included online Zoom sessions, a number of in-person sessions throughout the city, listening sessions online, and then an online questionnaire as well. And so without further ado, I will introduce Steve Shoecraft from HDR, who will lead this presentation. Steve.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Steve Shoecraft. I'm the project manager for this effort with HDR. I have a set of slides I'm going to walk through. The first one, I believe, sets up the agenda. Let's see if we can get this out. Second one has the agenda. We'll do a very quick overview of the plan itself and the process that we're going through to develop the plan. Do a summary of some of the feedback we've received through early outreach and engagement activities. So staff has led a really intensive effort to try to get the voice of the community to shape the project early. So it's important for us to understand where folks are coming from as we enter this sort of process. I'll talk about some of our early sort of distillation of opportunities and challenges that we see Clearwater facing over the next 20 years and start to think about how that shapes the development of the plan. Talk about the elements of the vision of the plan that sort of guides our decision making about the policies and strategies incorporated in the plan. The physical framework, so how the city's organized and how we start to think about different places across the city and what their future holds, and then talk about next steps. So as Kyle said, the planning process, it's defined by state law, but state law has changed over the last several years, so we have a lot more options about how we structure the plan and how we present it to the community. And it was important to have that strong guidance, but it's also helpful to have the community shape their plans to sort of represent their own personality and shape their own direction. So it sets the vision and direction toward the future of the city. We look at demand and constraints on the traffic transportation network. We look at land use and land use capacity to support future development. We think about how that translates into a capital investment strategy. And then the plan includes all the policy guidance that staff uses to advise the Community Development Board and you as you think about land use and development and capital investment decision-making in the future. Process is really relatively straightforward planning process. The data and analysis and visioning and planning framework phase is what we're in right now. So this is where we're doing our homework to try to build the foundation for the planning effort. Stage 4 is when we dive into the plan elements. So we start to put together goals, objectives, and policies for land use, for mobility, for resiliency, for environmental conservation. And then we move into a refinement and adoption cycle where we bring that early drafts of those documents out to the public and get feedback, and then move toward bringing it back to you all for final action. This is it may be a little hard to read the text on this slide, but there's a lot of planning work underway in the city. So there's a lot of related plans that either recently completed, which provide a foundation for the plan, like Greenprint 2.0, but a lot of work on other either sort of system-specific or topic-specific planning work that's going to guide our effort as we move forward with the project. Some of the key features of that are your strategic plan as you set goals for the council, which are more short-term, but we'll also be building on the work for the Parks and Rec Master Plan, Potable Water Plan, and some of the mobility planning work, the citywide, looking at citywide mobility and citywide assessment for transportation, and they'll help shape our objective and policy development. So the early outreach and engagement, as Kyle mentioned, to kick off this effort, the planning team organized a series of in-person and online engagement activities to introduce the planning process, learn about community issues, and hear from the community about their visions and ideas for the future of the city. These were held in the spring through August of this year, and another round of engagement is planned as we start to move into the plan development effort. This next section highlights some of the things that we learned through a series of online and in-person engagement activities. There were 31 community leaders shared their perspectives with the consultant team in a series of listening sessions. Several people participated in online conversations. Over 200 participated in in-person engagement activities, including participants drawn from local schools. So we have a youth perspective, which I'll have a slide on in a second. And over 150 people responded to an online survey. So this is a quick word cloud to give you a sense of what people talked about when they talked about the city. People talked about the beach. They talked about the city's attractiveness. People talked about how they value parks and recreation and natural resources. Generally, the diversity of people and places, that this is a full-service city in a large, dynamic region. Talked about the importance of the city's location in the region and the assets that that provides. And also the feeling of community, character, neighborliness, and sort of some of those intangibles that are important to think about as we dive into the more technical elements of the plan process. 4 of the community conversations, the in-person events, were held with local students. So 50 younger residents participated in answering a series of questions about what's missing in the city, what makes you want to stay here, and what's the future hold for Clearwater. And what struck us about it was the level of detail they went into with some of these answers. Now, these were led by staff, but as we went through the notes, they were highly specific about what's missing, like we want a skate park, we want better sidewalks, we want to see recycling, what makes them want to stay, so what do they value about the city. And like everyone else, at some point in the conversations, people talked about the beach, they talked about the city's park and recreation facilities as really important assets. The youth folks focused a bit on, their form of transportation is walking and biking, so they want to see better facilities and safer facilities, and they want to see more ways to keep them active and busy, so they mentioned recreation programs and sports programs. And then for the future of Clearwater, it seemed like they drilled down a little bit from their own local perspective and talked about housing, talked about less car use, more walkability, nice neighborhoods, more technology, higher education options, and job opportunities, with the idea that they imagine themselves staying in the city. What do they need to be there? In the website, we asked 5 key questions, and we highlighted some of the takeaways from the answers that we see from that. So along with the beach, people talked a lot about downtown and the future of downtown. The downtown should be the heart of the city. It should be active, interesting entertainment opportunities, shopping, places to eat. People talk generally about, and it was interesting, they talked a fair amount about alternatives to driving. So they talked about walking either in a neighborhood context or downtown context or a beach context. And they talked about public transportation, which is kind of a challenge. It's a challenge across Pinellas County. It's a challenge across the Tampa Bay region. But people were talking about that as a possible option. Sometimes it was very specific to get from downtown to the beach. Sometimes it was more about getting to school and getting to work. As I mentioned before, Parks Rec and natural areas, sort of as a general theme, and I'll continue to come back to this, were brought up a lot about what people value in the city now. So people appreciate the investment the city's made in its public parks and recreation facilities, and they're concerned about access to those facilities, and they're concerned about the natural areas that exist and the protection of those natural areas, whether it's the beach or some of your drainage ways and stream corridors that cut through the city, or some bayfront locations. And then this sort of highlights one of the specific concerns which relates to housing affordability, relates to social services and access to opportunity. People talked about homelessness, and they talked about housing affordability in general. Whoops, sorry about that.
Whoops is never good.
Just a simple technological error on my part. Trying to crack my notes with the screen, and I got off track there. In the 5 questions survey, some people provided some really interesting answers. This one was interesting. So it was one thing people liked most about Clearwater, and they gave us 5 or 6 or 7 things in this answer. But if you think about a statement about what's important for the city, this is a great statement. So if I have to pick one thing, it's natural beauty in an urban setting, but then they continue. So Clearwater's clean, full of life, full of nature, refreshing weather, friendly people, lots of community assets like parks, recreation centers, it's paradise. I mean, this sort of encapsulated a lot of the feedback that we got from folks through the engagement exercises. When people talked about concern, they talked about this sort of notion that there's a possible division between businesses and neighborhoods or the city and residents. And so that when we did ask people about what they were concerned about, there was these sense of tensions between different goals of different members of the community, which is natural, and we hear that in communities we work with around the country. They think there are remedies such as seeking community engagement and input prior to building projects. So I think that this one came from someone that was concerned about development activity and how that affected their neighborhood or their quality of life. And that's a common theme, and that's something that we'll really be tackling as we move through the planning process. Something that would improve our city the most, a mention of affordable housing again, and reliable and thorough public transportation, access to the beach, and the beach access and the beach connection was, when we talked about the beach as a great asset, but then a lot of folks said, I don't go there because it's too busy, and traffic's tough, it's tough to park. And so that maturing of the beach as a destination is an important question for policymaking, and we'll be tackling that as well. One question was, we'd also like to tell you this about the city. One person said, we had a diverse city, but people drive through to the beach, so there's some sense of, people don't understand all of Clearwater. They understand Clearwater as the beach and maybe downtown, but they don't understand the rest of the city. So this we take as something that we can think about in terms of the city's identity, to how do people recognize when they enter the city? What's different about Clearwater than the rest of North and Central Pinellas County? And I think that can drive some ideas about policymaking and placemaking. So in addition to the community outreach, we've been pulling together our research task, working with staff to look at existing conditions. We've prepared a series of research looking at land use and development, housing affordability, mobility, sustainability, resilience. That research in combination with what we heard from the community sets up this next set of slides that I'll go through quickly. But this is kind of a preview of the way that we're starting to think about how to tackle questions when we develop the plan itself. So the city enjoys really significant locational advantages besides its physical features and natural resources. An amazing natural setting between the Gulf of Mexico and Old Tampa Bay, close proximity to the region's premier employment centers, and a short drive to two major airports. A really powerful story when we think about what's going to support the city's future. Just as a quick note, so I talked this planning area projection is the planning area which includes unincorporated areas within the broad boundary of the city. So this is defined as the city's planning area, so we look at those numbers for the comp plan. So what it indicates is that you have the potential, you're projected to grow by about 10,000 residents between now and 2045. But you're a largely built-down city in a largely built-down county, and you have about, based on land use information, about 4% of your land area is vacant. So what we know from that is, and most of the neighborhoods you have are built down.
4% that's developable or 4% total?
Total.
So that's including our green space.
No, it's separate from green space, but it doesn't mean all that land is unconstrained. So we haven't done an overlay to say that some of that is wetland or some of that is floodplain.
I just think that needs to be differentiated.
Okay, yeah, we may have, I can pull up one of the reports, but I think we've got some additional information on that.
Okay.
But for this discussion, it's really about that 10,000 new residents could be 4,000 new housing units in the city, and that's not going to fit in your existing neighborhoods. So it kind of sets the stage for thinking about how you accommodate that growth through redevelopment, through infill development and retrofit along commercial corridors and downtown and in other locations around the city. So downtown, clearly people recognize downtown as the heart of the city, important destination for cultural entertainment, working and living. Downtown's future has gotten a lot of attention and a lot of investment over the last several years. From a policy standpoint, downtown's future is largely fixed from the biggest picture perspective. You kind of know where downtown is headed to a large extent. The downtown plan update exists. You've made capital investments on major streets. You imagine Clearwater, we'll see the benefits of that in a couple of years, and that's going to significantly change the face of downtown. What we're really thinking about is, from a planning perspective, what's the next set of questions for downtown over the next 20 years, and how does the plan influence that direction? So that's sort of a bigger picture question about what happens next and how downtown evolves. We'll be tackling as we start to get into the planning process itself. Beach by Design planning program and significant investments in streetscapes, and public spaces has helped transform the beach into a nationally and internationally recognized destination. And interestingly enough, and a couple of people pointed out this, it's also one of the most walkable places in the Tampa Bay region. So if you think about your investment in streets and streetscapes and public spaces, it is a great place to park, leave your car behind for the day, and walk around from place to place. But with great success comes challenges, and that's some of the things you face as you look at the last waves of Beach by Design. So the last part of those entitlements that have been granted through that planning process is creating some conflict and tension between the folks that live on the beach and the folks that are investing in new projects on the beach. So we think addressing that sort of maturing condition of the beach is important, and also addressing the accessibility so everybody can enjoy the great value that the beach affords and offers to the community. Changing consumer behavior, the rise of e-commerce, and the declining competitive position of older properties, all issues accelerated by COVID, are impacting the future of the city's older commercial corridors. So US 19, Gulf to Bay, and smaller mixed-use corridors are all facing the same kind of challenges. We show this image at Countryside Mall to illustrate the scale of the challenge, that given market and economic conditions, it's likely to look very different in 20 years. So we're trying to think about what sort of tools the city needs to have in place to guide that redevelopment and reinvestment, and what happens to these large footprint sites as retailing changes, as we have different behavior. What do these places become, and what sort of opportunities do these present for the city? This slide has a build on it, so you can see, I'll flip through these really quickly, but when we think about neighborhoods, one of the ways that we think about it is the age of the property and the competitive position of different neighborhoods. So the blue, you can see the little specks of blue on the west side of the city are the older properties. So this is pre-World War II era. And I'll build these slides up slowly. This is the immediate post-war property. So this is what was built in the 60s, 70s. Then we've got 80s and 90s, and then your most recent development. So a lot of the residential property in the city is 50 years old and older, and we need to think really carefully about the competitive position of that property over time. So the kinds of challenges facing your older neighborhoods and your mid-century neighborhoods are different than properties that have been built in the 2000s. And that may affect the way we draft that element. So we don't treat all housing or all neighborhoods the same. They're going to have different challenges. They exist. They have different competitive positions in the city and region, and we need to think about that as we start to structure recommendations. Catch up my slides. So new approaches are also required to address limited roadway capacity, improve travel safety, and meet changing travel demand. As a built-down city, you have limited opportunities to add new capacity to the roadway network. Anything that you do that requires new lane capacity is going to require right-of-way, significant costs. In projects around the Tampa Bay region, right-of-way is becoming more than 50% of the total budget for a project just to acquire the land to create that new capacity. So we really need to think carefully about how you use the existing capacity that you have on the network, whether through operational improvements, making them more safe, flowing more easily, and also maybe changing travel behavior a bit to support other alternatives to driving to each individual destination. So those are things that we're going to be thinking about, and I think you're scoping or have approved the mobility planning work in the Transportation and Engineering Department, so we know we'll get the benefit of that analysis as we move further down this path. Beaches, parks, natural systems are really critical assets shaping the future of the city. And the plan will need to focus on supporting sustainability and resilience, incorporating elements of Greenprint 2.0. So we won't repeat that, but there are elements in there that focus on land use and transportation that we'll bring into the plan to reinforce them. Looking at how we protect the places that people value most, so some of the natural systems that may be vulnerable to impacts through development or through climate change, improving access and availability, and conserving and restoring the most sensitive systems in the city. So we started to think about, with the community in our public engagement activities, and the work that we've been doing, we've been thinking about the kind of structure of how we state the city's vision for the future. We started to think about the elements of that vision organized around these 6 topic areas. So we're drafting this now, and we'll have something back to you for review and discussion. But what we're thinking about is a broad vision statement, but then also building on that vision statement with some ideas about the importance of the city's neighborhoods as the sort of foundation or sort of fundamental building block for the city. Thinking about equity and inclusion and diversity as a broad value that the city appreciates. So we know that, and then it means obviously different things to different people when we say terms like diversity, but this is a diverse city both in its people and in its places as part of what makes it a great place to live and an attractive place to invest. Obviously, as a coastal community, resiliency, sustainability is critical, but also is thinking about your natural beauty and how you protect that and how you build on the assets that you have. Looking at economic, social, cultural vibrancy, that it's a great place to live, but it's a great place to work. It's a great place to play and get entertained and enjoy cultural opportunities, and that's been one of the things that Clearwater's been known for in the region. As somewhat of an arts community and a cultural community. So we think about how to build on that. The connected and accessible gets to questions about how we get around, so how we access places within our neighborhoods, near our neighborhoods, and around downtown, how we get from downtown to the beach, and how we connect with the rest of the region. And then cooperative responsive is kind of begins to talk about how we do that, how the community works together, how the business and residents and visitors engage in discussions about how to move forward how decisions are made, what levels of transparency are appropriate in making those decisions. Those would affect the way we make recommendations about how things happen in the future. And then the plan framework is starting to think about the structure of the plan itself. So we're looking at a place-based approach designed to address the future development character and design quality of different places across the city, from neighborhoods to downtown and the beaches, to the city's economic centers, multimodal corridors, and neighborhood centers. So the place-based planning approach allows us to make the plan more accessible and useful to plan users, so they can say, okay, I live near this multimodal corridor, I want to find out what's planned for this corridor, I can go to the plan, find that location, and understand what city policy and strategies are for that location. So this is how we're thinking about it now. That the city neighborhoods, and this is just the gray in the background of this one, that the city has interesting, distinct, diverse neighborhoods with different kinds of challenges and opportunities. So we think about those neighborhoods and think about policies and strategies that focus on stability, livability, affordability, and recognizing the diversity of what's out there now. That downtown Clearwater and Clearwater Beach are the sort of primary economic engines of the city. That these are the traditional hubs for living, for working, shopping, and entertainment, premier economic engines, as I said. And they're also the most walkable, vital, transit-supported places in the region. So if you're thinking about the places that are performing best on a small piece of land, these are providing that high level of efficiency and performance. So we focus on ensuring their continued attractiveness, competitiveness, managing remaining development potential, and improving access. The mixed-use centers along US 19 and Fort Harrison, these are the places where you've seen recent investment, where you've got some guidance, both the plan for north of downtown and the US 19 corridor plan provide pretty significant direction about the form and character and scale of development that's appropriate. We need to think about continuing to understand better what that retrofit and redevelopment opportunities are to improve access and connectivity and walkability in those places now, and think about what their future holds in a really changing competitive environment. The multimodal corridors and neighborhood centers are the places that provide a lot of the daily needs for the folks that live in the city and work in the city. And they range in scale from Golf to Bay to some of those corner stores and shops that exist throughout the city neighborhoods. But thinking about their future is also very important. They provide identity to the surrounding neighborhoods. Again, they provide all the goods and services that folks need to have available to them on a daily basis. But their character is changing dramatically. Like, these are not always easy places to walk around. They're not always easy places to drive to, and definitely hard to drive between from destination to destination. So we think about their future and start to provide some clear policy guidance about what happens on the corridors, but what happens at the edge of the corridor, between the corridor and the surrounding neighborhood. And we know that transition has been the subject of some discussion in recent years about how mixed-use properties on corridors affect the surrounding neighborhoods. So we need to think about having the right tools in place to guide decision-making as projects come forward. And then the Hercules District represents a really interesting opportunity to think about how it fits within the broader land use pattern of the city. It has the potential to support continued investment for small-scale manufacturing, for non-residential, wide range of non-residential uses. It could be kind of the creative maker location where people can start a business, to build their business, and then possibly, move to a larger operation. But we need to think really carefully about how you deal with that asset over time. There's pressure on land use changes in places like that across the region, as the potential for non-residential and industrial development gets squeezed into fewer and fewer locations. So we need to really think about Clearwater's position regarding the future. So the structure of the plan itself is relatively straightforward. We're looking at collapsing the elements of the plan into a series of chapters, kind of more thematically than by hard topic. So vibrant and livable is where we would bring in land use, housing and neighborhoods, centers and corridors. Connected and accessible would be the transportation and mobility related recommendations for the plan. Sustainable and resilient where we'd pull in conservation, coastal management, parks and recreation related recommendations. Fiscally responsible is what we're calling the capital improvements element. So typically there's a tight connection between the capital improvements plan and the comp plan, as looking at your capital investments as a specific way to implement comp plan recommendations. And then collaborative engaged would be recommendations about how you work together, how the community interfaces with the city regarding land use development and transportation decisions in the future. So next steps on the process, and this is the closeout here, is that we're in the fall now is we're finalizing, having these briefing sessions, we're finalizing our data and analysis. So there's some research that we still have underway that we're cleaning up. We're developing the vision statement, clarifying the recommendations about the physical framework for the plan, so the slides that I just went through about the different places across the city. We'll move into the drafting of the individual plan elements in the next month. We'll look at next spring for plan element workshops, so we'll focus on specific topics and get people's feedback as we start to put the plan, pieces of the plan together. In the spring 2022 to fall 22, that will be when we actually draft it, pull it together as a draft plan document to get CDB, your review, and the community's review, and then move into adoption this time next fall. And that concludes the presentation. We're here to take questions.
All right. Questions from council? Who wants to start? Councilmember Beckman.
Thanks. I have a ton of questions. I don't know, you know, like, and I submitted my questions before, but, you know, well, let me go back to the last slide because I just made that note. So when you have, under next steps, drafting of plan elements will be starting soon, and you'll have plan element workshops. Who's going to be involved in those plan element workshops for those different chapter parts?
Yeah, we haven't worked with staff on the details of how that would roll out, but what we'd be looking to do, we'd either do it, the question, and this would be great feedback from you all, is whether we do it thematically by topic or whether we do it by area. So it seems to us that by area would be the best way to do it. So we would go to different portions of the city and try to get feedback across the whole plan, rather than do it like a mobility workshop and then a land use workshop and a conservation workshop. But that's the general strategy. So what we're doing in terms of the development of the plan, we're taking, sort of pulling apart the old plan, looking at what gets carried forward to the new plan, looking at what needs adjustment, and then what needs to be developed new. And we want to get that structured so people have something to react to. So we'd like to get something that we can get in front of people and then ask them to come to a meeting or share their thoughts online or in another way. Once we have something that's, you know, we don't want them to ask them vision questions again. So we want to give them something to react to.
Okay. But that does go out to the public. And
Yes.
so in geographical parts of the city, and then you'll be asking questions about the plan chapters.
Yeah, we'd like to give
With-
them time to get them out there on the website and distribute in other ways, and then give them a chance to look at it and then come back and talk to us.
Okay. Well, there were a number of questions that I asked and had some initial feedback on, and there were a couple of comments that said, this is what we'd like to discuss in the meeting this morning. So I'm going to go back and find those. And so, well, one of them I remember is taking a look at the countryside area and what we would envision out there,
The residential or the commercial?
the commercial. And so one of the things, I guess I have my notes, slide 23. Can we consider marketing for a university center or educational focus in the countryside area? It's got great parking access. And I also made a note that look at all that space on top of Countryside Mall for solar. It'd be nice if the state allowed purchase power their agreements, but we'll get there. So anyway, that's part of the guidance, correct? Like, what do we envision for the Countryside Mall?
I think that's what we're asking for when the US 19 plan was complete for that area. The idea at the time was that would be appropriate for mixed-use redevelopment, and we thought at the time that maybe Countryside as a mall was coming to its last legs. It's still somewhat, a little bit unclear how that's going to play out, but what we put in place was recommendations that would give them the density intensity to support redevelopment of the property. And if you know, the property's carved up into several different ownership pads, so it's not an easy kind of project to take down from a development standpoint. I think just generally we've seen educational uses occupy old mall sites. It's one of the uses that can, and this is happening at University Mall in Tampa, because of those big department store footprints are difficult to occupy by a lot of different uses. It's all, impossible for residential, really difficult for office because of the limited light access. But we've seen some educational uses go into those kinds of spaces. There's nothing in the US 19 plan that would preclude education, but I don't think it's a specific target now.
For slide 33, you talk about some mixed-use corridors, I guess, and so my question is, what about possibilities along MLK or Drew or Myrtle for that? So, additional mixed-use centers, and I think that would be good, because, is that slide 33? Or,
I'm trying to get to the right, see if I can tell which slide it is. We had mixed-use centers on this slide,
There
but
we
then the
go.
next slide added the multimodal corridors and neighborhood centers. So the idea is to try to think about how these different corridors could evolve over time and what uses would be appropriate. So some of these corridors, like Golf to Bay, serves more of a regional community and regional market. Some of the corridors, like MLK, North Fort Harrison, South Fort Harrison, serve more of a local market outside of the hospital. So thinking about what scale of development would be appropriate, what range of mixes of uses would be appropriate is important, and then thinking about the transition and the relationship to the surrounding neighborhoods is really critical. As we wouldn't want to allow for significant intensity up against a single-family house. It'd be that sort of relationship is important for us to understand.
you all have nothing else to say?
No,
I've got
I
a
mean-
ton to say, but
Okay, because
why don't we- we'll go around.
I get a little I don't like to just go through all of my questions, like boom, boom, boom through
we'll
the
give you a
slides.
second bite of the apple.
That'd be great.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Well, I'm looking at the page towards the end that says plan chapters, and I always I have to chuckle a little bit because fiscally responsible. Do we even need to have that on there? Because it basically is the driving force on every one of the other chapters as well. I mean, we can't do anything without being fiscally responsible. It always falls back to the joke I always tell, or what I always tell people, even during a political campaign, no matter where your political leanings are, left or right, I challenge you to find me someone who says anything other than I'm a fiscal conservative. Because what is the opposite of that? I'm going to spend your money like a drunken sailor. And I don't think anybody's going to get elected by saying that. So fiscal responsibility is at the forefront of every single one of those other chapters. And I'm not sure it needs to be put on there because it's an absolute given that that's what's going to happen. Because no, we can't, even you're focusing on the sustainability and resiliency of the city, we can't, I can't believe anybody sitting up here is going to put the city into debt just to achieve something in that mode. So that's my personal opinion. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think that just kind of jumps out to me like, if we have to put fiscally responsible on there,
Understood.
we're
It's
not doing
assumed.
our jobs.
It's
Yeah,
assumed.
just-
I would agree with you, it's assumed. Anything else?
Not off the top of my head, but I'll come back.
Councilmember Albritton?
Yeah, we have two very important studies going on right now. We got the comprehensive plan, and then we're talking about the strategic plan as well. And just for the benefit of people wondering what's what, the strategic plan, is that more of an implementation of a comprehensive plan? A comprehensive plan is a bigger vision to 2045, and a strategic plan is how we get there. Could you tell us exactly what the difference between the two are?
The comprehensive plan, there's some things that we need to do for state statute that focuses on, primarily on land use and mobility, and then there's other elements like coastal conservation and parallel flood provisions that you adopted a couple of years ago are part of that state requirement. So Chapter 163 Florida statutes tells us what we need to have in a plan, and then we can provide additional guidance based on the city's discretion. But it provides the policies and objectives that staff is going to use when they review a land use proposal, or DOT wants to do a roadway project. You'll look at the comp plan and say, what did we say about that, the character of that roadway, or the capacity of that roadway? So it provides some guidance that wouldn't be a strategic plan focus, and it provides 20 to 25 year big picture guidance. The strategic plan is what you guys will focus on as a council over the next 5 years typically, and that will be guided by your new city manager to work with you on what you want to focus on in the short term and what actions you want to take to push the city forward. So they're not that one doesn't lead the other. We need to make sure that they're integrated. We wouldn't want to do anything in the comp plan that's counter to what you have in the strategic plan. So it's really how those two documents support one another that we'll be working on.
I think they're interwoven, but I think the strategic plan goes beyond the comp plan, and that the comp plan is still dealing mainly with our land use and development. Whereas I think the strategic plan it's much broader than that. But it is one of the ways that we will accomplish what we have within the comp plan. I think it determines where our priorities are going to be, which is money and time.
Yeah, and we're going to use information from the comp plan to really guide us in the strategic plan, so.
Yeah, I think you'll pull for the strategic plan, you pull from those other planning processes that you have underway too. There's elements of green print, like how you manage city assets, which is more detailed than anything we'll deal with a comp plan, but that's going to be important from a strategic planning standpoint.
So I know one of the other things was that you brought up is what happens when you have commercial development up against residential, and that's been something we've been talking about for years and years, because it seems like we always have an issue where they meet. So is that something that, and I know everywhere else has that too, but we try to, as we come down to the residential level from commercial, we step down in the size of developments to try to make that difference not so much right along the borderline where they meet. But I mean, we still have issues on that, and it's not surprising. We just try to do the best we can on that. One of the things that I've always liked about the US 19 corridor plan is to me it's been the way it was planned was a series of activity centers all the way that would develop both commercial and residential areas, like smaller little groupings along the way, instead of the big, let's put a great big mall here or something. They were smaller little like neighborhood kind of things that were, I guess, supported by small amount of businesses for that particular neighborhood. It's a whole different concept than kind of what we went through the last probably 20, 30 years as things kind of expanded out. You see more of that in the comp plan happening along the corridor, US 19 corridor?
Yeah, I think The reason we added the multimodal corridors and neighborhood centers on this map was to recognize that there's other places where smaller scale uses could be appropriate that would allow someone to run an errand but not jump on a 19 or go on a golf to bay to meet some of their daily needs. So one of the things that's happened over time, there's a North Pinellas example where the Pinellas Planning Commission was really concerned about non-residential uses in residential areas, so everything got loaded on the 19. So think about north of the city, up to Tarpon Springs. Almost all the commercial uses that exist in North Pinellas are on 19, and it's made 19 a real challenge. And if some of those uses were distributed a little bit in neighborhood centers and along smaller scale corridors, 19 may not be what it is, but it also may be easier for folks in Palm Harbor to meet their daily needs without having to experience that challenge.
Yeah.
So we think a lot more about mixed use, about different scales of possibilities. So it's not just one size fits all across all the commercial corridors, but there's potential for a neighborhood scale, community scale, regional scale redevelopment, and think a lot about mixed use. There's been changes at the state that now require cities to allow or provide opportunities to allow affordable housing in industrial zones and commercial zones across the whole city. But you want to plan for that. You don't want to just have someone do an apartment complex in the middle of a light industrial district. That's not going to provide a very high quality life or very good connections to what those folks need. So mixed use is important, but figuring out the right kind of mixed use is what we'll be thinking about.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bunker.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenge of reaching out to get the community input? I attended most of the listening sessions, and it was a handful of people that showed up. And there were always a couple of people who went to every single meeting. What type of impact did the online questionnaire get? How many people did we reach with that?
I think the number was 150. 150 for the online questionnaire. And that was in the late spring, early summer. And actually, based on our experience in other communities, we thought that was pretty good. It doesn't seem like a really significant number when you've got, a potential of 150,000 people participating and you get a couple hundred. But people are really, people seem to be more excited to participate when there's a specific challenge that they want to address. So if there's a land use decision or some other kind of roadway project, they'll come out for that because the impacts are very concrete. The challenge with the comp plan is it's so general and broad brush and long term that people don't feel that sort of feel as strongly compelled to get their voice out and be heard because they just don't they don't know if that's a good use of their time. So the staff did a lot to communicate that this was valuable. It's going to shape the process, and I feel like that was pretty good participation. And I think if we can, one of the ways that we try to have success in getting out to folks is work through existing organizations. So the neighborhood associations, business associations, some of the community groups, try to work through those channels to get the word out. Try to meet people in places they're already getting together. So if there's a neighborhood association meeting, to show up there and use that as our engagement vehicle. Because it's hard to ask folks to keep coming out, keep participating, and you're going to have 5 or 6 planning processes underway at the exact same time as we're asking questions. We need to make sure we can combine some of those efforts.
Thank you.
So kind of piggybacking off of what Councilmember Bunker was asking, are there any groups that we do not feel like we adequately surveyed? And if so, are we going to go back? And then how did we deal with the frequent flyers? Because I'm glad to have them there, but if they're voting 6 times, can they skew results?
Yeah, one of the things that staff did was track participation by zip code, and like for the online answers, and looked at where folks were coming from for the community conversations, the in-person sessions, and then did initial outreach in places that they thought were underrepresented. So there was work to try to do a second, did you guys go through a third round? There was a second round of engagement activities focused on those places or voices that they thought were underrepresented. So there was some work to do that.
Yeah, so after our in-person community conversations that we had, we took a look at where we had our participants come from by zip code. And I know towards the northeast of the city, we had undervalued numbers in that zip code. So what we did was we did targeted Facebook posts, and I think we used our neighborhood one that we have to actually go out to those zip codes so that any advertisements for this process were sent to those zip codes only. That way it wasn't going citywide. So yeah, we did take a look to see where we had undervalued participants and actually target them specifically with advertisements on Facebook
Right.
to get them to participate.
Because I did see some come, I went to all of them but the morning side, which was on a Saturday, and I was out of town, but I saw some people that were at every session, and they put their dot on every single session. So I just want to make sure of that. I was interested to see some of the things that are missing in the city. That was voiced as a concern. I don't know if you want to leave yet, Kyle, or not. And this may be more of a communication question, but many of those things that were missing, I'm curious, are people unaware of the fact that we have things like a skate park? Or did you get back that they're in the wrong place? Or that they want more of them? Were we that
So that slide,
specific?
that slide was specifically for the youth outreach
youth.
activities.
Uh-huh.
And we didn't, they weren't set up for us to address a question like that live and in person, so we didn't say, oh, but there is this opportunity and this opportunity. So it's more of a, they have a perception that it's missing. I don't think we had an opportunity to drill down to find out, well, do you mean in your part of town or a certain kind of opportunity? So that's something, we could think about that in the next round of engagement to try to drill down deeper.
Well, I'd just like to understand that. I mean, there were several things on the list that we do in fact have. Now, indoor recreation, does that literally mean an indoor soccer field or hockey? But we do have a lot of gymnasiums and other things indoors. So some specificity would be helpful, I think, to really understand or follow-up questions. So tell me as a consultant, how do we go from words and opinions to tangible changes in the comp plan?
So comp plans are challenging, they're challenging documents because at some level, it's useful that a comp plan is kind of like a community's wish list for the things they'd like to see. That's not necessarily a bad thing to have, but it's also really important to have some form of an action plan that sets some priorities about what you're going to focus on. Because I can tell you an example from other communities. I think we counted 1,700 recommendations in a comp plan when we came in to help them finalize their comp plan. And we worked with them to distill that down to 20 action items to say, of all these things you've said, they're all great, but you can't do 1,700 things. You might be able to do 20 in the next 10 years. So let's get to that list of 20 and then start to align resources to move those things forward. So I think that's one of the things we need to get to in the recommendations is we do need the wish list because it represents your statement of community values, but you may not be able to tackle all those things. So we have to get to some form of a series of action items or action statements that guide your work and your investment as the plan's developed. So that, I think that making that leap between the broad statements and the action is important. And so that's what we'd be coming back with, and some action planning recommendations.
Do you have enough data to triage and kind of rank what the priorities should be?
I think we'll get there. I wouldn't say we do now. I mean, I think one of the questions we've worked with staff on is like what policy direction is relatively settled and where do you need more direction to guide decision making? So, and that's why I said beach by design provides direction for what happens at the beach. And that's relatively settled. There's some work to massage the edges of that, but the larger questions are settled. Downtown is relatively settled. It's just, you're in the early stages of this sort of refresh of implementation. So you've got a lot of work to do, but a lot of those steps are already set forward. I think the real questions are the future of your commercial corridors and the future of some of your older and mid-century neighborhoods that may experience some competitive challenges. So I think we know a little bit more about where to focus attention. And related to neighborhoods, affordability. And affordability is a concern for every city in the country.
Yeah.
And nobody has enough money to tackle it at the scale that it needs to be tackled, so we have to figure out how best to use your limited resources to make a difference. So I think we can make progress on commercial and mixed-use corridors, neighborhood stability, competitiveness, livability, and the commercial corridor question.
Yeah, sometimes the market takes care of that. We were unaffordable in 2007. I hope that's not the way we resolve it this time.
Right.
But you brought up something in the downtown plan. If we're going to add 10,000 people, that means some density and intensity in some of our areas. And do you think the downtown character districts are correct in their current density, intensity, or have you gotten that granular?
We've supported the city on previous work, so I'm familiar with entitlements that are out there. And you've got a lot of entitlement downtown. The market has been slow to take advantage of it. So I think that's probably the question is, how do you attract the investment to start to take advantage of those entitlements? I think you have a lot of entitlements downtown. You also have a lot of entitlements along the US 19 corridor in the centers. And we've seen like the first wave of investment in those locations, but there's still a lot more out there.
You're leading right into my next question. So, so you're familiar with the US 19 plan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe apartment complexes with no mixed use and storage facilities are a threat to that plan? Because we can put a plan into place, but as you said, if the market does not act upon it, then don't you have to reanalyze the plan?
The presence of apartment complexes and self-storage, and they go together. So if you look at any place where you've seen significant apartment construction, you've seen self-storage follow. In the in-between locations that are going to be less walkable and in the future less transit supportive places, I think they're not a bad land use. It's in the activity centers where you want to see mixed use. Maybe something that gets recalibrated.
What are your thoughts on our aging housing stock? I mean, when I talk to people, Countryside is our newest neighborhood, really, and it's 50 years old.
Yeah, we've been a little bit surprised. We expected in our analysis to see more apparent market challenges throughout the city, but and by that I mean places where we're seeing decline in per square foot value for residential. We didn't see that. We're seeing increased per square foot value for residential across the city. It's variable, but we didn't see that. I had expected to see it in those early post-war communities, 1,200 square foot houses, slab on grade, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, the early post-war stuff. But you're seeing investment in those neighborhoods. We're not seeing significant decline. It's the relative competitiveness is what we're trying to get a better handle on. The Countryside question, it appears that Countryside is holding its value and it's still a popular place to invest.
Mm-hmm.
Those houses were bigger than the post-war houses, so they're more competitive across North Pinellas. And we didn't I'm telling you, all the reasons that we didn't see significant pockets of concentrated code enforcement violation or activity. There's a lot of things that we look for when we're trying to figure out, like, where's their decline in neighborhood quality of life. We didn't see a lot of those markers when we looked across the whole city.
So canaries in the coal mine.
So the neighborhoods that we would worry about is where you have older housing stock, limited increase in per square foot value, and older age of household. Because those places, as those folks retire and move out of those houses, we're trying to understand what the replacement market looks like. And if they're not attractive for reinvestment, we would see that decline, not now, but maybe in 10 years, maybe in 15 years.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to get a better handle on. But there's been a really strong replacement market. So when we do this work in upstate New York, it's a different story, because that's the ticking time bomb. Here, it's not as challenging because the replacement market exists, and Clearwater is a popular destination when folks move to the region or move around the region.
And then just refresh my memory, how much was your contract?
$250 total.
Okay.
We have with a subconsultant that's helping us with affordable housing analysis and affordable housing in general.
All right, other questions? Councilmember Beckman?
So you made a couple comments about the feedback that we got, 300 responses, and some might have been repetitive. And in the analysis of what people said, I mean, to me, I found that not surprising. I mean, that's what I hear when I'm out. That's what I heard when I was campaigning, and that's what I hear continuously as I'm out in the community. So those things kind of rang true. One of the questions I had was, so we talked a little bit about possible educational uses for the Countryside Mall area, business district or area. Could we think about light industrial there as well for easy on, easy off with 19?
It's the light industrial is usually a challenge because they're looking for relatively low-cost land and pretty low-cost buildings. And so they have to compete against the other folks that want to take advantage of the accessibility of 19 at that location.
Okay.
So usually, the communities that we're working with want to try to figure out where that light industrial would be appropriate and then restrict other uses from competing and increasing the value.
I think Countryside Mall is still our largest single taxpayer in the entire city.
And then your discussion about, you think our downtown is relatively fixed, what we're going to be doing there, but if there's the possibility that the county is going to move out of its county buildings downtown, I think that, wouldn't that leave a lot of opportunity or challenges if we have even more vacant buildings down there? So I don't know that it's really set for the next 5-10 years.
No, that's a good, when I say sort of the policy, maybe the right terminology, maybe the right way to say it is the policy framework is settled. Because I don't know, if the county left, it's a big challenge for economic development to figure out how to repurpose those buildings or redevelop the buildings. So it could be a great opportunity. But in terms of the scale and character of development that would occur there, I think that's been recently kind of confirmed, and the new form-based code provisions memorialize that in a pretty high level of detail. So I don't know that it changes the policy direction, but it would create a challenge, and I think it probably would fall on the economic development strategic plan to address that challenge most directly. But from a land use development, mobility standpoint, I'm not sure that it would cause us to rethink the current plans for downtown.
Okay. And then you talked a little bit about the strategic plan and the comp plan. We have, on one of your earlier slides, are all these guiding documents related in support of planning efforts. And one of my questions was, was there a hierarchy and how are they all going to fit together? So the one that we have recently completed is Clearwater's Green Print 2.0. And I've been, we've talked about the strategic plan again and again, and some really important hot topics that have come before us over the last year. And it's always like, well, that's going to be part of the strategic plan. And so the comp plan isn't due to be finalized kind of until fall of 2022, right? But it's my understanding, we want to get that strategic plan done before fall of 2022. So we can have an understanding of the comp plan and where you're at in stage 3-ish, 4-ish, but we're not waiting for the comp plan to get
No.
finished, right? I mean, our strategic plan is a little more short-term, big goals, and that comp plan is more overarching.
Yeah, I think, I see us learning from the strategic planning process because you are going to be ahead of us and you need to be, because that guides your more day-to-day, week-to-week work.
And how or what initiatives can we put forward with a comp plan to deal with affordable, attainable workforce housing challenges? What do you suggest?
The comp plan, the most direct relationship would be in terms of any kind of regulatory relief or regulatory adjustment. So if you make changes to the land development code that favors either a more diverse housing stock or favors specifically affordability, those are things that we would make the recommendation for in the comp plan, and then there would be the LDC adjustments to follow as an implementation step.
Anything else?
I think I'm good.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on what Councilmember Beckman said, you know, the county is talking about possibly vacating downtown at some point in the future. To me, some people look at it as a challenge, other people look at it as an opportunity. We need to be focusing on people that are going to look at that as an opportunity, not as a challenge. And to do that, you've got to be a little more flexible with what you're allowed, what you're willing to allow. I think some of the things you said about our downtown area, downtown's got great potential, but we've got to have a mechanism to make sure that the people who own that property buy into that program. And if they're not going to buy into that program, we have to have a mechanism to try and create that opportunity. And I don't, you know, this plan's not going to be done before I'm out of this seat, so it's not going to end up being my vote. But I mean, it is, it's going to be that part is going to be a challenge. The county properties, I think, is an opportunity, and I think the development community will look at that as such. I think the other part is we cannot dictate. I don't believe we can dictate, nor should we dictate from here what Countryside Mall is going to look like 25 years in the future, because the people who own that property have certain developmental rights to it, and they're going to be looking from an economic standpoint to maximize that opportunity. So it is, it's going to be a challenge, but yeah, it's easy to put on the paper, this is what we want, but the final application of it isn't always going to get you what you think it's going to get you. That's the way I look at this plan. It's the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah, I would, let me say I'd appreciate not to say what would happen in 20 years to the mall, because I don't think anyone's got that. If I had that clear of a crystal ball, I'd probably be, you know, I'd be enjoying my condo on the beach and having a cup of coffee. I think that, but the city does has an important role in sort of putting some boundaries around it. Like what are the city's interests in that future? What sort of city investment may be required to support a significant change on that site? Like we don't know a lot of those answers yet, but I think that it's an important part of the discussion that we need to have with the comp plan.
Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Beckman.
Thanks. On the vision and themes slide, you talked about cooperative and responsive, and you mentioned different levels of transparency. I wanted, what does that mean, like, different levels of transparency?
I think what we heard in a lot of the meetings was a perception that people have that they're not part of or don't have access to shape decisions. We know that they do have access and can participate and get noticed, and but there may be better channels of communication. There may be a different way to tackle that question. So that's one of the things that we look at. It's not that people say that they may not have the level of influence they'd like. So we take that as a starting point to think about what's behind it, what does that mean, what exists now. But it's not. It's a perception, and a perception that we need to think about and look at what we may be able to do differently.
And then when we talked about the mixed-use development kind of corridors, so MLK, maybe Drew and Myrtle, we could consider those as well? I mean, is that what you're looking for, to broaden that
Yes.
view?
Yeah.
That it would be okay to look at, I would think that that's a good idea to look at those corridors, especially with the new CRA coming into MLK.
For North Greenwood, yeah.
I think you're gonna have to be sensitive though on Drew if we're reducing capacity, and now we're talking about putting even more mixed use. I don't know that those two are gonna work together, but. All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. 2.2.
Approve an agreement and purchase order for professional services pursuant to RFP 48-21 to Vanessa Hangen Rustlin, Inc., VHB, for the preparation of the North Greenwood Community Redevelopment Plan for a fee not to exceed $161,500, and authorize the appropriate official to execute same. Ms. Clayton.
Good morning, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. I'm really happy to present this item to you today. I feel like it's a culmination of a lot of time and effort that was really brought to us by the Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition. As you know, that's a nonprofit made up of community members, business owners, and community organizations that are really focusing on improving the quality of life and reducing poverty in the North Greenwood neighborhood. The coalition has been advocating and working with the city to establish a CRA that will focus on the required place-based strategies, but really also focus on those people-based strategies that can really affect neighborhood change. Step one. Step one of these efforts was accomplished back in October of 2020 when City Council approved the findings of necessity that confirmed the study area that you see here up on the map, and that this area met the requirements of Florida statutes to establish a CRA. The county also approved those findings in May of this year and delegated authority to the city to move forward with the required planning. In June of this year, the Planning and Development Department issued an RFP for the development of a CRA plan. We received a total of 4 proposals and a selection committee that was made up of Planning and Development, Legal, Economic Development, and Housing, and the CRA and the Clearwater Urban Leadership Coalition sat on the committee and reviewed those proposals. We interviewed 2 of those teams, and we are recommending that you enter into agreement with VHB to prepare the plan in an amount not to exceed $161,500. The proposed scope is centered around 5 tasks, and there's a real major focus on public engagement that will help the consultants gain an in-depth understanding of the neighborhood and where it's going right now and where the neighborhood wants to go and how can we get there. To supplement in-person public engagement, we're also going to have a project website, and then hopefully we'll have some opportunities to go out into the community at events to engage people. There's going to be a steering committee that's made up of neighborhood stakeholders, including coalition members, property and business owners, as well as nonprofits that are operating in the area to help guide this process. And there's also going to be a technical in-house committee to provide expertise. We're also going to engage some community agencies like Ford Pinellas and the county and PSTA will be involved. We anticipate that this is going to take 12 months to develop the plan and shepherd it through the city approval process. And once we do that, we will move it forward to the county for approval. And after that, we're going to need to establish a redevelopment trust fund and get the county's approval of that as well. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Clayton? Councilmember Beckman.
I had a question about the timeline overview. So you just stated that it's about a 12-month process?
To do the plan itself and get it through the city approval.
Okay. Do we have targets, like, you know, this will be developed, or, you know, in 3 months, and then 6 months, and then 8 months?
I don't think that that's,
Just wanted to know if there were little targets on that timeline, and then,
yeah, I don't have that here with me, but we're definitely going to get started as soon as we can. Our first work is going to be putting together that public engagement plan. And what we hope to do is send out a postcard with all the public meetings in one shot so that people know from the beginning to the end when we'll be working with them.
are you thinking after the first of the year to start with that?
Well, by the time we get this contract approved this week, get the consultant on board, figure out when all those meetings are going to be, that would be the earliest we could do that for sure.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor?
I guess for the timeline, the county has officially approved this CRA district.
They've approved the findings of necessity and has given us authority to move forward with the planning process.
And do we know when their final vote to implement the CRA into this area is going to be?
We have to take them the plan, and once we take them the plan, they will approve that, hopefully. We'll be working very closely with them throughout the process so that that happens. And then we have to reestablish the redevelopment trust fund for the TIF. That'll get approved by you all and then approved by the county.
But we're in a very safe position spending this much money to do this work with knowledge that when it gets to the county, they're not going to throw us a curveball.
I believe definitely they are in sync with us on this. And they will, as I said, participate with us so we ensure that we have their buy-in so we don't run into those kind of issues.
Prior to the vote, I talked to all 7, and they were very much on board, so I don't anticipate any issues unless something really surprising happens.
We don't anticipate that.
Consent?
Yes.
Thank you all.
2.3.
Approve the annexation and initial future land use map designation of residential low and initial zoning atlas designation of low medium density residential LMDR district for 1882 Lakeview Road and pass ordinances 9509-21, 9510-21, and 9511-21 on first reading. Mr. Brotherton.
Thank you, Kyle Brotherton, Planning and Development. So this case involves a voluntary annexation petition for a 0.249 acre property which is currently occupied by a single-family dwelling. The applicant is requesting annexation in order to receive sanitary sewer and solid waste service from the city. The applicant has paid the required impact and assessment fees and has been connected to the city's sewer system. And solid waste will be provided upon annexation.
Any questions? Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, I have a question. As I serve on the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board, and we talk about the health of the bay and our water in this area, I wanted to ask if when people are voluntarily asking to be annexed into the city, is there a possibility that we can ask or require them to check their laterals, the health of that lateral water sewer pipe that comes into the main one?
I don't know if that's the appropriate question for me to answer. I don't know if anyone's here from utilities who could answer.
I mean, because it
Rich
can
or
protect our
David?
groundwater, and, you know, any other municipalities do that? I mean,
Yeah.
Most of them that come in are coming off of septic, which is really good.
right, so,
So,
Rich.
yeah, if they're converting from septic to sewer, they'll have a brand new lateral. if they're already on our system, there's a few that are already on our system. We generally can't require them to do anything under the current code. I know Largo is working on their code to change that, but right now we can't.
Okay, but that's something we could look at. I mean, for ones that aren't coming from septic. So if they're coming from septic, they're gonna have all new piping, right? So it'll be
Right.
clean.
Right.
But if they've already got it and they want to be annexed in, we could ask or require, a $200 inspection of that lateral to make sure it's healthy and in good shape so that it doesn't pollute.
Yeah, I
our-
think we'd have to modify the code. And that's a very, very few number that are currently in unincorporated, connected to our system.
Okay,
What is the cost to do that?
I don't know, a plumber, I would think under $500,
I-
just to do the inspection, but if they find something, that's when the real cost would come.
Okay.
I think when I talked to Ed Sherwood with the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, he said it was about $200 to do an inspection. But again, it depends on what you find, right? And if you find some significant leakage, you'd want that taken care of before they
Yes.
start polluting the groundwater.
And then I think you have to make a decision also, if that becomes an issue, then they don't annex in, but they may not fix the lateral either. So
Yep.
there can be unintended consequences.
Just wanted to,
Sure,
Mention that.
it's a good question. Any other questions on 2.3? 2.4?
Provide direction on the proposed Second Amendment to an existing development agreement between the City of Clearwater and 411 ES LLC, which provides for certain changes to the conceptual site plan and elevations and increases the overall number of hotel units and height proposed for the subject site, and confirm a second public hearing for City Council chambers before City Council on December 2nd, 2021 at 6 p.m. or as soon thereafter as may be heard. Mr. Perry.
Mark Perry, Planning and Development. As noted, this is the proposed Second Amendment to an existing development agreement. In July of 2019, the development agreement was originally approved, along with conceptual site plans and elevations. In October of 2020, the council approved the first amendment to the development agreement, and that was strictly for a time extension. This second amendment to the agreement will increase the overall number of units proposed for the site. Oh, and I should mention that in November of 2020, site plan approval was obtained for flexible development application and also a TDR, transfer of development rights, all consistent with the original conceptual site plans as part of the development agreement. Anyway, this second amendment is required because the overall number of units are increasing from a total of 74 units to 91 units, and the height is increasing from 65 feet to 80 feet. They're also modifying their proposed docks. They're going from 55 slips to 50 slips, and they're also decreasing the number of marina facility slips from 22 to 8. In addition to that, they do need to increase the number of parking spaces to accommodate those extra units. To be clear, the number of units allocated from the reserve is staying the same. 8 units were allocated. There's no change to that. The increase in the overall number of units are because the applicant is intending to transfer additional units to the site. So that's where the additional density is coming from. So clearly they'll also have to, if this proposed amendment is approved, they'll need to go back through the flexible development and TDR application to amend both of those applications. So I want to make a point, just in case there's a question about marina facility slips. Commercial docks are any docks that are associated with a restaurant or a hotel. Marina facility are those slips that can be rented or leased out. So the number of marina facility slips, which are the slips that the applicant desires to lease or sell or rent out to anybody is decreasing from 22 to 8. So they still want the ability to lease out to anyone. The remaining slips will be for the sole use of guests of the hotel only. So the primary changes to the development agreement are pretty much relegated to those recitals and specific points of the agreement that deal with the overall number of units, overall number of parking spaces, and the number of slips. The development agreement as it stands, and there's no proposed changes to any of these components, has a lot of restrictions on what can occur on those marina facility slips. In short, there's no dry storage, there's no refueling, there's no maintenance, no commercial operations open, available to the general public. The applicant has been very clear those 8 slips, which can be rented, sold, or leased, are intended just for, Joe Schmo to keep their boat there. So it's not like they're going to have a diving charter operating out of there for the general public. All those stipulations are remaining unchanged. The overall concept is pretty much the same. The overall subject site consists of 4 parcels, and there's 3 on the east side of East Shore, 1 directly across the street on the west side. A 42-space parking lot is proposed on the west side of East Shore, and the hotel is located on the east side. All that is consistent with the originally approved concept plan. So the big change that you'll see on the outside of the building is an increase in that height. I should also point out that the proposed height of 80 feet is permitted and encouraged by this character district of Beach by Design, provided that you meet an acreage amount, which this site does, but importantly, that the project is going to provide for a publicly accessible boardwalk constructed at the applicant's expense. And no change is proposed for that. The only change to that is there's a sidewalk that will provide access from East Shore to the boardwalk. It used to be located on the south side of the site. They're moving it to the north side of the site. So I just want to make that point. As I noted, all these changes do need to go back to the Community Development Board. There's a level 2 application that was approved. It consisted of 2 applications, a flexible development and a TDR. Both of those will have to be amended. With that, if there are any questions, I'd like to try to answer them for you.
Questions for Mr. Perry? Councilmember Beckman.
So this developer wants to increase the number of units, change some things on the dock, and increase their parking. You said that, so you made note that the units are coming from the pool, right?
8 of them.
Eight of the ones that are going to be increased?
No.
8 total?
The increase is solely from transfer of development rights from other properties within the Beach by Design area.
Okay, that this developer owns?
Either owns or is looking to acquire.
I mean, there's TDRs all over the beach. How many are left in the pool?
None. Yes, I'm sensing that there might be a question about where the different units are coming from.
Right.
So 55 of the units are permitted outright just by the underlying land use. 50 units per acre. 55 of them, they can just do.
Okay.
8 of them have already been allocated through this original development agreement. There's no change to that, mostly because there aren't any more units in the reserve that are, that you can request. There's 0. So the increase in the overall number of units is solely from development rights that the applicant is intending on securing. Where they are in that process, I won't know till they actually submit their amended TDR. I mean, for all I know, none of them will pan out. You know, I don't know. And they won't actually build any of those TDR units.
So this is like hoping. This person's asking for permission to increase the density with the hope that he or she is going to get additional units that are already depleted from that pool.
No, they're not getting any more units from
Oh,
the
that they
reserve.
already, okay,
They asked for 8 from the reserve.
right?
They've been allocated 8 from the reserve. There's no change to that whatsoever. The increase is solely from units that are existing on other properties that.
They're a commodity.
Yeah, exactly right. They're
On
a
paper,
commodity.
they're there on paper, and they're all spoken for. And so this developer needs to go out to those different owners of that commodity, the hotel rooms, and say, I want to buy those hotel rooms from you and put them on my development, make it bigger.
Right, and whether or not the developer has actually paid for those, I would assume that they haven't, because there's no sense
Paying for it if you haven't gotten an okay, right?
But they want the approval to, they want to amend their development agreement to reflect that overall increase in units. But to be real clear, there are no more units available for allocation in the reserve. They're not asking for any more. They were approved for the allocation of 8. Those 8 are still with the property. In fact, quite frankly, if you all decide, no, we don't want to approve this, well, the original development agreement is still in place. So, you know, those 8 units could conceivably still be built on this site.
So when I look at it, and I look at, okay, so this developer wants to build up more and have more density there. And if I'm looking at the only way on and off the island over the Memorial Causeway, and people at Island Estates want to extend their turn lane to get in and out because of traffic buildup, that I don't have much to work with as far as, so they're asking for, please reduce traffic over that Memorial Causeway, it's too much. And then we have people on the beach where we must have 8 different developments going up right now that aren't even, you know, the 4 walls aren't already up. And then this person wants to increase density, but those rooms are already out there. They're already out there, and so it's where are we going to place them on the beach? And so for me to be concerned about the increase in traffic and pollution and all that other stuff that comes with increasing density is a moot point because it's already been decided. So now what we're thinking about is where will they be? And as I look at a resident out here who has advocated strongly against building a bigger hotel at the Chart House, which is surrounded by residential, it might be better if those units then could be put over here where we're not abutting residential, right? Although everybody who comes over that Memorial Causeway and lives on North Beach or lives over on Clearwater Point is still dealing with way more traffic. And it's only going to get worse as those buildings are completed in the next couple of years, right? I mean, it is.
Well, conceivably, yes, but I don't know for sure. But to kind of, I just want to agree with your point. No, I'm not going to correct anything that you said. I want to, because you made a very important point. The density is being increased on this property. You're absolutely correct. Those units that they're intending to transfer to this site must come from within the beach by design planning area. So it's not like the overall intensity of the beach is suddenly increasing. It's, at this point, it's just kind of being moved around. That's an important point.
Okay. And then, what was I going to ask? That just slipped away. I think, well, I mean, I saw all the attachments that looks like some of the attachments that were part of Clearwater Point full investigation about manatees and environmental impact and all that has been brought over here, which it kind of looks like just we're going to put up some signs and educate about seagrass underneath and go slow with your boat.
That's what's required. And in fact, we usually don't even ask for that stuff at this point, but they included it, so since it was in their packet, we forwarded it along. Usually we ask for that sort of thing as we get to site plan approval, but it was there, so we included it.
It's a no-wake zone where their building's going to be.
Yeah, I don't get really involved in the manatee protection. That's kind of outside of my realm of knowledge, but.
And then do you have, so just to think about the businesses that are along Poinsettia, I mean, weren't they asking for a setback change? Aren't they gonna wanna be closer to the road?
They will be asking for, well, it'll be pretty much the same setbacks as was already approved through the flexible development application that they did in 2020. It did involve setback reductions along the front. Beach by Design specifies their side setback requirements, and they're meeting or exceeding those. And on the rear, since setbacks are measured to property line, their property line extends well into the water. So the only rear setback, and I'll do that in quotes, the only rear distance requirement that they have is that distance from building to seawall, which is more of a structural issue that can be reduced based on construction techniques.
As I look at where this is and all the building that's on the beach, and we look at the comprehensive plan feedback about people wanting to walk or bike different places and not be in a car, I'm just wondering, where do people, or how can people navigate that beach on a bicycle? Because where is it safe to go from Pier 60 to your home on North Beach, or on Clearwater Point? I mean, it's just, the buildings, it seems like, are right on the sidewalks, and the sidewalks are getting narrower and narrower.
Well, no, because the sidewalk is within the public right-of-way, and there's no reduction in that right-of-way. So the setback, any setback reduction is taking place on the subject property itself. So the sidewalks are going to remain, as they are or larger. I think they're proposing 10-foot wide sidewalks.
On Poinsettia? 10-foot
On East Shore.
East Shore.
On East Shore.
This is on East Shore.
Yeah, so and that's actually consistent with the conceptual site plans that were part of the original development agreement and also carried through the flexible development approval. So there really shouldn't be any impact at all. In fact, Beach by Design does kind of give us some pretty good guidance on sidewalk widths. So they're meeting all that. So the real goal is to get folks parked once. So they're providing all their parking. I would expect folks to park there and then walk or bike. They're providing on-site bike racks. So I don't think that this proposal would have any negative effect on the ability to walk or bike someplace.
And I think I got one last question.
Sure.
Isn't the property, the 1 acre, don't we have to make exception for them to build up the density on that, on the footprint of what it is, 1.2 or whatever the?
Yeah, that's
make an
their
exception?
1.12. Well, the acreage is fine, but they do need to request as part of their flexible development approval that increase in height to 80 feet. As part of a flexible standard development, and that's notwithstanding anything else, I'm just talking about height, they could request up to 50 feet. So anything more than 50 feet, in and of itself, would require going on to the Community Development Board. So the originally approved conceptual site plan had a height of 64 feet. So nothing else withstanding, even that height would have required going to the Community Development Board. The code has language that allows for height up to 100 feet or what have you, but Beach by Design is more restrictive and takes precedent over the code in that case. And in this case, the height is limited to 80 feet. And there's a stipulation for acreage size, which they meet, and also for the provision of that publicly accessible boardwalk. So if you want the height, you have to do the boardwalk. And they're doing the boardwalk per all of our requirements in Beach by Design.
So So we give feedback, because the language says provide direction, and then it goes to the Community Development Board to approve from 64 feet to 80 feet, because anything more than 50 feet has to go to the CDB, right?
Well, ultimately, the next step is if there's any direction that you all need the applicant to act on, obviously, we'll take that and have them act on it. The very next step, of course, is the council meeting this Thursday, and that's again to provide direction. And then in December, beginning of December, will be the final public reading on this, where either it's approved or not. After that, then they need to go back to the Community Development Board to iron out the flexible development and also their TDR amendments.
Do they have a timeline when they have to acquire, if they can acquire those
Yes.
units?
Yes, the development agreement, and there's no change in this stipulation, it does require that they obtain site plan approval within 1 year. Now, the site plan approval process takes about 2.5, let's call it 3 months, so they need to submit for their FLD and TDR amendments, within like 6 or 7 months of December to make it through the process.
And staff doesn't have a recommendation?
At this point, we're looking for direction. In our analysis, at this point, I'm looking at, does their conceptual site plan and elevations, do they meet the requirements of beach by design? So that's why there's a beach by design guidelines narrative in there. Does it meet the litmus test for a development agreement in general? Is it still consistent with the specific requirements for allocation of units from the reserve? If they came in, they said, well, we're going to do this as resort attached dwellings. Well, they can't do that. It has to be for units that are rented for 30 days or less, 1 calendar month or less. And all that is still being met.
Anything else? I know, I'm
Yes,
talking
sorry.
about from you.
No. I'm good for now, thanks.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Mark, what is the height of the Marriott Courtyard that's getting ready to open on Friday? Off the top of your head?
Well, it can't be more than 80 feet.
It's probably right at
It's
it.
probably at 80
Probably
feet.
right
I
at
think
the
it's
80
7
feet.
stories,
I
isn't
think
it?
it was 74
And,
feet or something like
Yeah, my understanding, the TDRs are something that the property owner probably has already entered into contracts for off of various properties, probably contingent upon us moving it forward, because once we allow this to move forward, anticipating that we do, at that point, he can execute his contracts to purchase these TDRs from various sites on the beach. So that would be my understanding. The parking lot on the west side of Poinsetta, or on East Shore, is it strictly a surface, or is it a multi-level?
It's a surface parking lot.
It's not a big enough lot to do multi-level anything, multi-level, not multi-level parking anyways, don't have enough turnaround time.
They tried, but they couldn't meet the design requirements. In a nutshell, beach by design requires that if you're going to do it in a parking structure, it can't look like a parking structure. And it turned out they couldn't do much with they basically had like a parking deck, so it was surface with one level of park, and it just didn't work out from a design standpoint.
Okay.
A surface parking lot is what was approved in the first place with the original development agreement, so
So-
that part's pretty, in fact, all of it's pretty much the same except for the height. And, they've redesigned their parking on the ground floor of the garage, of the hotel, and obviously they've added units inside the hotel.
Okay. All right, so, yeah, I mean, to me, the increase in height is probably partly due to the increased parking because of the 8 units, not just strictly because of the 8 units. I think the 8 units are taking it all the way to 80 feet, but I think a combination of the units plus the additional parking necessary.
Well, it's an additional 17 units.
Well,
The TDR component, they already had approval for 11, so they're grabbing another 17 from around the Beach by Design area. So it's really an increase of 17 units. So that's where that height's coming from.
Okay.
Councilmember Bunker and then Albritton.
That Marriott, did you mention? Is that in the same neighborhood?
It's just down.
Just down the street,
north.
just north of it.
All right, because I know folks in the neighborhood are very concerned about the nature of the neighborhood being changed. And they say that parking is already incredibly difficult for them in that area. So I'll be anxious to see what they have to say on Thursday night. I'm just worried that increasing the density for them might lead to a big change in the complete area, but.
Well, there's really no residential in
That's,
this area.
there's not a
This is
residential
down
area. It's
by the
all,
roundabout.
it's all
This is
hotel
north
rooms
of the
out there.
roundabout.
It's just-
Oh, okay, never mind.
And again, their parking requirements are being fully met. So whatever the code requires, which is 1.2 spaces per unit on the hotel and 1 space per 2 slips, they required 113 parking spaces, and they're providing 113 parking spaces.
Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I do like the boardwalk. You know, the plan that they had years ago with taking East Shore and making a boardwalk along there was very nice, but the Marriott has it, and I think it's going to be a nice public amenity.
And the character of the neighborhood, to follow up on your point a moment ago, was anticipated and is actually encouraged by Beach by Design. So this is the exact sort of development that's been planned for in this area.
Ms. Clayton, when was that density pool added for the mid-priced hotels? Was that 11 or 10? It's okay.
Okay, I'm getting
I
old.
can't remember, that's why I'm
I
asking you.
don't- It was right after the recession, so,
Okay.
yeah, in that time frame.
And so I don't know who has this answer, or if you have the answer, but my earlier question was, how many remain in that pool, regardless of where they are? How
They've
many?
all been used.
They're all owned, but they all haven't been used.
They haven't
They've
been
been
built.
allocated, that's my question. How many remain to
projects
be
have not been
used?
built yet?
Yeah.
That have had development orders
Are there
extended?
250 units that haven't been
We
used?
can get that for you for Thursday night.
50?
We have that tracked. I would say it's more than that.
I mean, I know they're
Oh,
still
that's
floating
important.
around because there's a market for them.
Yeah, we'll get that for you.
I'm just curious. I mean, I will tell you back then, and I did not prevail on this, I wanted it to last 5 years and sunset. And if those units hadn't been used, but now here we are, and I think it was 2011, 10 years later, almost 11, and we still have them floating around.
Unfortunately, the legislature has, given
Every time
developers
we
all
have
these
a
rights to
crisis.
extensions for Zika and the opioid crisis and the pandemic now and others. So, yeah, the life of these development orders that should have died a very long time ago are still alive.
And every time the governor declares something, it's an extra 6 months?
Well, they have to come in and ask for it,
Mhm.
which they usually do if they're represented.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll talk further about this on Thursday. 3.1.
Approve guaranteed maximum price proposals to Keystone Excavators, Inc. of Oldsmar, Florida, in the amount of $109,450, and Coors Construction, Inc. of Pinellas Park, Florida, in the amount of $121,561.10, each of which includes a 10% contingency for renovations at the Enterprise Dog Park located at 2671 Enterprise Road, pursuant to RFQ 40-20, Construction Manager at Risk Services for continuing contracts. approve a first quarter budget amendment to transfer $40,000 from project 93286, parking lot bike path resurfacing, to project C2205, Enterprise Road Dog Park renovation, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Halios.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Jim Halios, Director of Parks and Recreation. The two items that we have, the two proposals we have before you today total $231,000 roughly, and they are for renovations to the Enterprise Dog Park from Keystone Excavators and Course Construction. This dog park is one of our more popular parks in the city and probably the most popular dog park in the region. Staff annually will go out and make minor repairs, but as it's aged close to 15 years now, we're looking at needing to do an extensive renovation where we will go through and regrade all of the trails, put new shell down, and then replace existing amenities such as the dog fountain, tent structures, footers for those shade structures, and then also the bridge. We anticipate this project to take about 90 days, and the park will be closed while the construction is taking place, just due to safety reasons and the ability to access that park from one entrance. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Halios, Vice Mayor?
That was going to be my one question. I read that it was going to be closed during the entire time. There's really no safe way to provide partial access to the dog park during this.
No, just because the type of
Doing
equipment
it
that we're going to be
phases.
utilizing for it, just allowing even partial use, it's just not going to work. You know, for safety concerns, we want to be able to just try to get in there, in and out as soon as possible. We understand it's going to be a disruption for citizens, but I think that they'll be more than happy once it's completed. And then if we only have to do this every 15 years, I think we're going to be in good shape.
So the temporary pain will be worth the price.
More than, yes.
Other questions, Councilmember Beckman?
When do you expect to get started, Jim?
Not really sure. I wouldn't anticipate till after the first of the year, but I can find that out for you.
Okay, and then are you going to do consecutively? It says the parking lot bike path resurfacing, that'll be done in conjunction with the dog park? Everything will be done at the same time?
Yes,
So when it opens, it's all done?
Yeah, and what they'll do is, I imagine that'll be done last, just because they'll stage out of there, and
Yeah.
then as they work their way through and then work their way out, they'll do that last.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Albritton?
So I didn't see an actual plan for this on it, but I read the proposals, and the thing that kind of caught my eye was there's so much small wash shell and screenings and shell, and there's 2,000 tons of this stuff going in there. And I know all the concern we had with the Crest Lake, dog park and grass and people's concern with stuff. Where are you using all this wash shell?
It goes on the paths that go in through the park, and I will tell you that we have never had an issue from any citizens regarding the wash shell in that park. They enjoy it, and they actually prefer to have that in there because, as you've been to that area, it is low, and there's some water issues that we have with settling in there. So in order to keep it from being a muddy mess, we go in there and we build up the pathways, and then we use the crushed shell and the wash shell all throughout the park to kind of alleviate any type of settling or water issues that we may have in there with ponding that may occur.
It's a pretty damp area, but it is a dynamite dog park and different from our other
Exactly.
dog parks significantly. So, any other questions? Consent?
Yes.
3.2.
Approve purchase orders to Claymore West, Inc. of Fort Myers, Florida for $149,892.20, and Rep Services, Inc. of Longwood, Florida for $124,621.97, each which includes a 10% contingency for the purchase and installation of playground equipment at the Long Center pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.5631C. Piggyback and approve the first quarter budget amendment to transfer $53,000 from Project 93-278 Long Center infrastructure repairs to Project 93-637 playground equipment purchase and replacement, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Halios.
Morning, Mayor and Council. Jim Halios again. These two purchase orders we have before you from Playmore and rep services for a total project cost of $274,000. Represent part of our CIP project for playground repair throughout the city. This is the Sunshine Limitless Playground over at the Long Center. By using these two vendors, they're the original vendors that we were used on the park. So when we're replacing different pieces of playground equipment throughout the playground, we do not have to do wholesale replacements. So this allows us to save a significant amount of money. We can go through, replace small sections, and then everything stays consistent. And then we're also repainting and refurbishing some of that area. And we anticipate this project to take about 2 to 3 weeks, where the playground will be shut down, and then we'll be able to open it back up for the citizens to enjoy. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
This was really a cutting-edge playground when we did it, that allowed kids with disabilities to play right along kids that did not. So it's great asset to the city. Questions? Consent?
Yes.
3.3.
Approve the guaranteed maximum price proposal of J.O. Delato and Sons, Inc. of Tampa, Florida for renovations and restoration of stadium seating at Baycare Park in the amount of $191,025, which includes a 10% contingency pursuant to RFQ 40-20, construction manager at risk for continuing contracts, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Halios.
Yes, thank you. Again, this item that we have before you is for J. Delato and Sons for the refurbishment of the seats out at Baycare Ballpark. As you know, those seats are approaching 20 years old as the life of the park. Part of the benefit and also the deterrence with the hot Florida sun is that those seats get oxidized, and with that oxidation occurs, they turn white, which I'm sure many of you have seen since you've been out there. And this refurbishing gives us probably another 3 to 5 years worth of life out of those seats. It makes them easier to clean and also can prevent further damage to the seats by refurbishing them. So we anticipate that cost to be around $191,000, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilmember Beckman?
Did the Phillies ask for this seat refurbishment, or did we decide that it needed to be done?
It was a mutual decision, but they had initially requested it, and this, I think, was something that we had hoped to do in the total project as we went through. But, now as that has kind of stretched out a little bit, we felt that this was necessary to keep up the standards of a major league ballpark.
So they had an issue and requested it?
Pardon me?
They had an issue and requested it?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and so we're in negotiations with the Phillies right now, and it's my understanding that within 5 years of the end of our contract, we're not obligated to make big improvements except for like safety and structural?
Actually, that is not correct. I spoke with our Attorney Owen Kohler, and there is some belief that that's actually more so related to technology improvements. So maybe it'd be a Wi-Fi upgrade, or if they had asked for a new Jumbotron or something of that nature, that's where that 5-year period comes in. But for something that's a like-for-like replacement or a repair to an existing piece of infrastructure, that would not be considered an improvement.
And this is a uniform refurbishment of all of the seats, not just like ones in the sun or ones that show wear. It's everybody's getting it uniformly.
Yes, and the reason for that is that, again, you can't really tell what this difference is going to be. So if we were to go in there and mobilize this contractor to come and do this work, and we did half of the seats that were in the area that had sun on it, and it's like painting a wall at your house. You paint one wall, and then you're like, well, that one doesn't need it, and then you kind of look at it and you'll be like, well, yeah, it really does. So we just felt that for the sake of uniformity and also for price too, it makes sense to have that one mobilization and get them out there.
They've pretty much uniformly faded is
Yes.
what they've done. So this is only going to preserve them for an additional 3 to 5 years, though? What would a full replacement cost?
A full replacement of the seating in there. Now, this is going back, 2 or 3 years, so of course the prices went up, is anywhere from $1.5 to $2 million. And that would be replacing all the seating in the entire bowl.
Right. And has there been an example where they've lasted longer than the 3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
I mean, are they structurally starting to fail, or do they just look aesthetically?
I would say they're more so look aesthetically. What we try to do is when, we'll get one-offs where seats crack, they fail, the back will break, and we replace them.
But inevitably, what we run into when we replace them is that they're not the same seat that was initially installed 20 years ago. So I would say from this standpoint, it's more of aesthetics and then being able to keep them cleaner when they go out there and wash them down. So that's the main kind of push for this is to do that.
I mean, it's really interesting because when we had the consultant look at capital expenditures for the Capitol Theater, I think they gave them a life of 7 years, which I always thought was absurd and kind of undermined that consultant. But these have almost lasted 20 in the elements. I find it ironic.
Yeah.
I have to mention it. Any other questions? Councilmember Beckman?
Can we, or have you asked the Phillies to share in the price of refurbishing them? Can they pay half?
It's a discussion that I think we could have, but again, per our lease agreement, it's really on us because we own the facility. You know, regardless of who is in that facility, I think this is something that would need to be done. You know, and you want to keep up a major league standard facility. So if whoever the occupant is, there's these costs that would need to be incurred to keep it looking up to an attractable level.
Vice Mayor?
Well, this is 18 years in the Florida sun, is what we're addressing.
They've done well.
And they've done very well. And we own the ballpark. It's our stadium. We, this repair is fine. And to me, to go to the Phillies and say, hey, you want to split it or whatever, when we're in the middle of this, this is nickel and diming in the overall picture of the negotiation, and I just don't see the need to do that. I think this is a reasonable expense, given 18 years of what the Florida Sun can do, and I wouldn't be surprised, because structurally most of these seats are in pretty good shape. I think we're on the 5-year, probably closer to the 5-year than the 3-year estimate for these seats. So I have no problem with this.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yeah, from just what I noticed, the seats, when you get off of them, they spring up, and it's just basically the end of them that have, at least where I could see, that's where most damage was. So I think it's good to keep the appearances up and make it look like a nice stadium. I'm sure the people that are buying the Baycare, they'd like to have a nice stadium, something that looks nice with their name on it. So
Consent?
yeah.
3.4.
Approve the joint use agreement between the school board of Pinellas County and the city of Clearwater, providing for the joint use of facilities from January 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2026, with an additional 5-year renewal options, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Lockwood.
Morning, Mayor, City Council, City Managers. Mike Lockwood, Assistant Director for the Parks and Recreation Department. In front of you this morning is a joint use agreement between the City of Clearwater and Pinellas County School Board. This agreement allows staff with both parties to work together to host indoor and outdoor practices, games, special events throughout the year. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Lockwood? Consent?
Yes.
3.5.
Approve the joint use land utilization agreement between the school board of Pinellas County and the city of Clearwater from January 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2031, with additional 5-year renewal options to provide an outdoor recreation park consisting of basketball courts and recreation play areas at the southeast corner of Russell Street and Douglas Avenue, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Lockwood.
Good morning again, Mike Lockwood, Assistant Director for the Parks and Recreation Department. For this morning is a land utilization agreement between the City of Clearwater and the Pinellas County School Board. The land usage agreement allows residents to access an outdoor basketball court and other play features, and also the program and allows us to actually use this area for additional parking. Philip Jones is right across the street, so when we do a Greenwood Panther football games, it's a very tight area, so using the space is very helpful for our staff.
Questions for Mr. Lockwood? Councilmember Beckman.
Quick one, just for clarification, can you explain who owns and is responsible for the MLK Center?
The school board owns the property, and I'm not familiar with the current group that's running that facility, though. But I can get that for you.
Thank you.
Consent?
Yes.
4.1.
Approve acceptance of the United States Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs 2021 Bureau of Justice Assistance Fiscal Year 2021 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program Local Solicitation Grant Award in the amount of $27,900 for Axon Signal Vehicle Equipment, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute. Same, Chief Slaughter.
Good morning, Chief Slaughter, Dan with the Police Department. This item is to kind of expand some of the equipment necessary to support our body-worn camera program. If you recall, back in 2020, the council gave us direction to implement a program, and in August last year, we purchased 200 body-worn cameras from Axon and some of the associated equipment that goes with it. We were able to utilize a grant last year to purchase 140 of the Axon Signal Vehicle modules, and this is another grant that will allow us to purchase another 100 of those items. The grant amount for $27,900 will help us purchase the hardware equipment, which is $279 a piece off of the National Purchasing Partners contract that we are a member of. And we would seek to, just so we're clear on what this item is, because we've had several Axon items that are coming in front of you guys, and some in the near future too, completely unrelated. This is the item that is built into the car that when the officer turns on his emergency equipment, the body-worn camera automatically activates. It activates every camera within about a 30-yard distance. So it's just a piece of equipment that, as we were trying to implement this, we knew we could kind of phase it in as we had vehicle turnover and such. So this is going to help facilitate that. There is another item coming before you in a couple weeks. I know there might have been a little bit of a confusion that is for actually some mobile video cameras that will be in the cars themselves. That's a totally different item. And then, so if you are willing to approve this today, we would just ask that you permit the clerk to enter into the Just Grants software system, the approval process.
Any questions for the chief? Councilmember Beckman.
So when the emergency lights get turned on one vehicle, any officer who's around that vehicle, their camera goes on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Causes a little bit of problems from time to time. If they test their emergency equipment outside the building, every camera in the building goes off, but we work through those.
Okay. And then can you just briefly speak to, I'm so excited that you've applied for a number of grants and we've gotten them to pay for these body-worn camera things and things related to the police department. But can you just give a brief explanation about how many grants are available? Are there lots of grants available? And do you feel like we have resources to apply for those grants?
Grants, I'm sure there's plenty of grants available. It's a question of whether or not there's really a cost benefit to the effort that you put in to achieve and maintain the grant. And then the city kind of had a negative experience, I believe, at one time with some of the strings that were attached with grants. For positions specifically, if we used them to up our positions and then we found ourselves where we needed to potentially downsize, it pretty much it created an inability to do so because of looking like we were supplanting ourselves. So it's been kind of a opportunistic. When we see a grant that fits our needs, fits our strategy, we take advantage of it. We're fortunate law enforcement that these JAG-type grants that come through DOJ are pretty reliable in some respects, and we get 2 of them every year and get some pretty good flexibility with them. They're easier to apply for than some of the other ones, and there's generally use them for equipment, so there's not like this mega reporting scenario. We used to have a grant manager, and she did a phenomenal job, but when the grants got a little scarce at one point, we weren't getting money from the grant that covered kind of the cost of the employee. So when she retired, we just kind of phased it out, and we've been doing it internally. Did put, like in this particular case, it did put a little burden from our department on the clerk that we did not intend to, because this Just Grant system sometimes is a little complicated, but we're going to work through that, I promise.
Are you okay, Ms. Cole? You have broad shoulders. But those, yes.
If I may, I would say I spoke with the clerk last week, and we are looking at the possibility of bringing that grant position back, because I believe that there's a lot more out there that we should be able to secure. So.
And there may be a cost benefit of that, but those COP grants in the mid-2000s, I think, was when we were getting them
Yes. Yeah, community policing.
for 2 years, 2-3 years, and then we had to continue them on for 5, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Consent?
Yes.
4.2,
To ratify an agreement between City of Clearwater and Tampa Bay Psychology Associates LLC of Clearwater, Florida for psychological and educational services in the amount not to exceed $180,000 during the contract period concluding July 31st, 2023 pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances 2.5631F, professional services not subject to CCNA, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Chief Slaughter.
This is a renewal of our agreement, essentially ratifying one that was put in place, and I'll try to explain that in a second. But it's, data is pretty clear that the officers are exposed to higher levels of stress, and because of that, they have higher levels of heart disease, alcohol abuse, psychological disorders, including post-traumatic stress disorders. So trying to be proactive in 2019, we kind of instituted an initiative that included expanding officer access to counseling services. And also in this 2092 agreement, we created a 24/7 resource line with the local provider that specializes in public safety. The officers are allowed to have individual counseling services, mental health check-ins. We also use it for our fitness for duty evaluations and our pre-employment evaluations. And also use this provider to do some of our training internally with the officers when they're onboarded, but also during in-service to just make sure that officers are mindful of the conditions or the implications of stress. This agreement was originally thought it could just be signed by the city manager's office because it was a $90,000 a year, so under $100,000, but it is a 2-year agreement, so that makes it $180,000, and therefore the error for which we are here to make sure that it gets ratified. So we apologize for that oversight. We don't have any questions.
I think this is a necessary program and money well spent. Any questions? Consent?
Yes.
All right, we're going to take a quick recess. Sorry, engineering, I'm going to hose you. So, but I'm getting looks. We'll be right back. See anything unusual out there, Ed? I did. Okay. Means they're forthcoming. Yes. I see that. So much for me running the meeting. We'll go ahead and reconvene the work session. We are waiting one moment for a special representative from the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh.
Getting beautified.
God is teaching me patience.
He's teaching, but are you learning?
Probably not. Bad student. All right, we're going to go ahead and do 5.1.
Approve supplemental work order 3 from Ardura Group, Inc. of East Water Reclamation Facility, Influent Pump Station Rehabilitation Project 13-0016-UT in the amount of $187,966 for additional design, increasing the work order from $168,965 to $356,931, and authorizing the appropriate officials to execute. Say, Mr. Brown.
Good morning. My name is Jeremy Brown. I am an engineering manager. The purpose of this item is to provide additional engineering services associated with rehabilitating the East Water Reclamation Facility's influent pump station. This includes additional subsurface utility engineering, demolition of the odor control system, some drip overflow piping modifications, arc flash requirements, some flood resiliency considerations, and other miscellaneous items. I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Brown? Vice Mayor?
I guess, Jeremy, the funding for this project, it says the funds are available in the East Plant upgrades. What, is that part of this exact program, that we're not taking money from a different program to put it towards this?
You're correct. There's a separate fund dedicated to this facility.
And there was plenty of money in it, so there's still plenty of money in it to finish this?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Councilmember Beckman?
Can you just explain, like, flood resiliency? What does that mean or look like as
Sure.
part of?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, that's something that we're taking into consideration on all of our projects. For this particular one, we don't know yet what the result's going to be. Part of the project is to author a technical memo, letting us know what our options are. At this point, I would suspect it's probably going to be something along the lines of raising electrical panels higher up off the ground, so that way, if there's any flooding or storm surges, they're less likely to be impacted. But again, there will be a technical memo that will be generated as part of this project.
Okay, so more expenses to come probably.
Excuse me, I'm sorry?
More expenses to come probably, right?
Well, not necessarily. We're hoping this is our final work order for designing it. And then once this is done, we'll bring a bid for a contractor along with construction engineering services and seek your approval at that time.
Great. Thank you.
Consent?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. We'll get to 5.2 in a moment. Ms. Costelli, do you want to introduce our special guest?
Yes, Mayor. Today we have the Tampa Bay Lightning presenting Thunderbug. And on behalf of the Lightning, they have asked me to share some words. On behalf of the Tampa Bay Lightning organization, we would like to present this commemorative photo of the 2020 Stanley Cup Championship to Mayor Hibbard and the City of Clearwater. Beneath the photo, you'll see the Stanley Cup ring engraved with the City of Clearwater. We want to thank you, Mayor Hibbard, and the entire city for your continued support of our organization. We look forward to delivering another one for our most recent championship very soon. Go Bolts.
That's okay.
Yeah, the skates don't make it easy.
Well, we want to thank the Lightning and the wonderful work they do in the community, Mr. Vinnick and the entire team. It is a huge part of Champa Bay to have the Lightning continue to win the Stanley Cup. We've gotten a little bit, we've gotten accustomed to winning everything. So we look forward to another championship this year and want to thank for the wonderful partnership. We always have those Bolts banners up on our old City Hall that everyone on the Causeway gets to see, and we hope they bring you luck this year as well. And we're thrilled to have the Thunderbug here with us. Go Lightning!
Oh, he's roller skating.
Ms. Costello, do you want to take this? It's pretty heavy duty.
But you're probably a Bruins fan. You're probably a Bruins.
Very cool.
All right, 5.2.
Approve a master agreement with Black and Veatch of Tampa, Florida for the water reclamation facility master plan project, 17-0007-UT, in the amount of $2,748,098 per request for qualifications 07-21, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Brown.
That's tough to
Tough
follow.
act to follow.
Yeah. Are you bearing gifts?
I'll try, see what we can do here. So my name is Jeremy Brown. Again, I'm an engineering manager. The city operates 3 water reclamation facilities. We refer to them as the Northeast, the East, and the Marshall Street. This master plan before you today includes conducting a detailed assessment of the 3 WRFs. This includes identifying vulnerabilities to climate variability and coastal hazards, assessing current and future regulatory compliance, evaluating individual treatment processes such as for capacity, reliability, efficiency, treatment alternatives, and operations and maintenance, and lastly, developing a prioritized list of capital improvement projects. I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Brown? See none, consent?
Yes.
Thank you.
5.3, thank you, sir.
Approve the conveyance of a distribution easement to Duke Energy Florida LLC, DBA Duke Energy, for the installation, operation, and maintenance of electric facilities at the city's Northeast Water Reclamation Facility, whose address is 3200 State Road 580, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Mahoney.
Morning, Council. Tom Mahoney, Engineering Department. Our utility engineers are doing a construction project requiring the relocation of an existing Duke transformer. This easement will provide them with the property rights to relocate that transformer. I'll be happy to answer.
Any questions for Mr. Mahoney? Consent?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. 6.1.
Ratify and confirm authorization to increase purchase order number 200001154 to Erickson Consulting Engineers of Sarasota, Florida, and for supplemental work order 1 for emergency repair design associated with the Clearwater Harbor Marina in the amount of $122,100 for a new design total of $215,600 pursuant to RFQ 26-19, Engineer of Record, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Chesney.
Good morning, Ed Chesney, Marine and Aviation. This purchase order increase is an increase to an existing work order we have with the city's marine engineer, Erickson Consulting. They are working on our downtown marina master plan for us, so this is a result of that. But before I get into the full extent of it, for the benefit of the new council members and our new city manager and city attorney, I'll give you a little history of the downtown marina, and then I'll tell you why we started the master plan process and what this emergency repair is all about. So that said, the downtown marina was constructed in 2010. The design for that marina was actually earlier, 2008. So we are working right now with a 13-year-old design. Technologies change over the years. At the time, that was what we thought a state-of-the-art design, and it still is, and it has served the downtown quite well for a long time. When I first came over to Marine and Aviation in July of 2017. 6 weeks later, we were visited by Hurricane Irma and tested the downtown marina for the first time. And we lost the north wave attenuator, which is the fishing pier now. A lot of people see that as a fishing pier, but it's a fishing pier second. It protects the basin from the fetch from the north with these wave attenuators that go deep in the water and break those wind and waves. So the downtown marina basically has two fetches that we're concerned about, the north and the south, and those are the most vulnerable parts of the marina. So this emergency order I'm going to talk about is for the south. So in 2017, we lost the fishing pier, the north wave attenuator, and it took us a year to replace that. And it was left vulnerable for that year. So at that time, I had just got to Marine and Aviation. We were faced with emergency repair vulnerabilities. My team, we put together what we thought we needed to be a master plan for that marina because it was reaching its 10-year point. When the marina was first built, we had like a 10-year warranty on the major dock components. The warranty wasn't as good as it sounds. It's like a car. The older the car, the less things are covered under the warranty. So we really had a very good warranty, but we always struggled with some of the components in those parts of the marina that were tested constantly. So losing the wave attenuator on the north, it's not unreasonable to think we might have similar situations on the south. And we had been repairing those pile guides, which are the things that ride and help the wave attenuators go up and down. Now, when I talk about 13-year-old design, they're not designing pile guide systems, wave attenuators like we have. We have side piles, and we have wave attenuators that, pile guides that work off of the pile. So there's weak vulnerabilities within that type of design. When we replaced the wave attenuator on the north, we went with the center pile. So the loads and the stresses were equally dispersed rather than all on one side. That's what failed in the north. So on the south, we have the same situation. We have pile guides that have been repaired repeatedly over the years, and there's no more meat left in these wave attenuators to fix them anymore. So the engineers looked at that. They told us that there could be some repairs done, but they would never last because we have the same issue over and over again. So they are proposing to us that we replace those three section of the wave attenuator on the south side. If we were to lose that, the docks are all vulnerable because they come apart together. You know, it's like a domino. The first domino to fall, they all would soon fall. Then the internal part components of the marina would be in jeopardy, and the not only the assets that we own, but the assets that our users own. So with this project, the master plan project identified this, and we had in that work order some preliminary design for fixes. So I gave the engineer of record all of our construction plans and as-built from 2010. What's important about that is that this marina was designed for us, custom designed, and was built, and all these pieces were fabricated. They are not, there's nowhere you can buy these from. The utilities are internal to them, so it's not just, going and buying. I always say we're not buying a refrigerator. We have to, meticulously redesign a fix, and the dock designer that built this is no longer in existence. So the technology is the same. Everybody can, design and build something, but it's what we have to do is identify where these are built, how they get to us, how long is it going to take. So part of the work that this design, and I'm going to put this on here just to show you where I'm talking about if this thing will come up. This is the section that is failing right now, and that's right there at the corner. To the south is Pierce 100 condominiums. So that's where we are going to take, there's 3 wave attenuator sections, and you can kind of see the side pile type things. These are the things that have failed and are continuing to fail. So we are going to replace this, and we actually have to replace it before we remove the older piece because we can't disassemble that marina because it's all tied and anchored in that corner. So the new piece will just be to the south of it. We'll install it, and then we'll do the demo on that piece. So Erickson Engineers has used our existing plans. They've designed to the 60% level, and then they will do the permitting. But what we have to do is we have to go to production. These things will be built. They identified who can build these for us. There's several dock builders in Florida, one of them in St. Pete. That's the one they're recommending we work with. Because these things are so large, shipping is a problem. They float them over here. They have to put them in the water. When we brought these back in 2010, they were fabricated in Tampa, and we floated them over here. So we have options to get them from dock suppliers in the Northeast, which is, a shipping thing, and in Europe. A lot of these are made in Europe. So we're not recommending we do that. We have supply chain problems with these things because of concrete and steel. So in order for me to move forward with this, I'm telling you today, I'm asking you to approve a design work order and permitting, but I'm going to be back to you for POs to get these things built. We have to put deposits down and get into queue. So and they're expensive. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars a piece, and they usually want 50% to go to production, 50%, 75, 75%, and so forth. That's how we did it with the wave attenuator fishing pier 2 years ago. We had to pay the deposits. They were built, delivered, installed. So it's going to be a few months to get the permitting, emergency permitting. We will work with that. We will achieve that and get that. But to get in line, we have to have piles. Those piles will be made, and they'll be steel this time, not concrete. They'll be round, not square. These are all square piles here, so the new designs are all circular piles. So steel is a premium, concrete is a premium. So I'm working with Erickson to get these emergency POs to get these other things ordered, and those will all come back to you. But this work is ongoing. That's why it's a ratify and confirm, because I didn't stop the process, because I need to get this stuff in place. So any questions? I'll be happy to try to
Questions
answer.
for Mr. Chesney? Councilmember Albritton.
Yeah, I heard that the failure was possibly tied to the pilings were not installed deep enough there on that side. They were supposed to be 30 feet, and they only went down 15. Did they find bedrock at 15, or?
We have recently done some more borings out there. We didn't have enough borings at the time when the marina was built, but we did have the bridge borings associated with that went through the marina. We had some borings in the north, some in the south. We did 3 borings in the south where this new wave attenuator is going to go just a couple of months ago. But when the marina was built, all of the pilings were going to go to a certain depth, 30 feet, et cetera, uniformly across the marina. They couldn't get those depths at various locations, so the engineers were proposing to do pile testing and all this testing on it so they could cut them short if they got the resistance that they needed. So throughout the marina, there were dock piles that were cut short. The pilings in the south have not failed us. The ones in the north did, and those were ones that were cut short back in 2010 because they gave away with a constant beating. When Irma came through, we were 24 hours under tropical storm winds. We never got hurricane force winds there, but that fetch from the north just tore up that wave attenuator and actually made the piles tilt to the south. The same thing, and the engineers are looking at all of the pile depths from construction, and they suspect that some of those in the south were cut short too, but I don't know that for fact. But that's not the major failing component, but the new piles going in will be to depth because we're going to drill them, not drive them. Those were driven bang, bang, bang. So they will drill these in and set them in place at the correct depth.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're not duplicating the same.
No. Believe me, no, we will not duplicate a problem like that.
And that was my question was going to be: are they going to be drilling these new pilings, or are they going to be driving them? And
they will be drilled as they were in the north.
Get them to the right depth. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Consent?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
7.1.
Approve the 2022 City Council meeting schedule. Councilmembers and Director has a copy of the proposed dates for next year's council meeting schedule. Generally, the council meets on the first and third Thursday of each month with the accompanying work session at 9 a.m. on Mondays, unless there's a holiday, which then the work session scheduled to Tuesday. In terms of your anomalies
you suggesting one meeting in April or moving? What's your suggestion?
Right now, is a suggestion just to have the one meeting based on what we did this year. But if there is a need to meet, we can schedule a meeting. Otherwise, does council want me to schedule the following week instead of the 3rd?
Well, it's far enough out that you can really manage the size of the agendas. So I don't want to conflict with Passover, so I would prefer to either go to one or move it. What's your all's?
I agree.
It's up to you guys.
You're not going to be here.
I'm not gonna be here. You guys figured it.
Yeah, I don't think we should meet that week.
So move to one meeting?
On the 18th?
I'll move it to the 11th for the
Yeah,
work
the
session
11th
and
for
the
the entire.
14th.
So I'm hearing
for the-
one meeting. Okay?
14th for the meeting.
Yes, please. Anything, Mr. Jennings?
Oh, yes, I just wanted to make sure that you and the council know that we're working on an ARPA, American Rescue Fund process. We started the discussions last week. I believe others have been working on that prior to my arrival, but we hope to bring that forward to the council for your consideration in the very near future. I'm looking forward to community meeting tonight with the mayor, and a community meeting tomorrow night with Councilmember Beckman, and then Wednesday night, an informal meet and greet for the launch of the Friends of the District. And so my second week is pretty full already.
Mr. Margolis, anything?
No, sir.
Okay. Council, any new business for future agendas?
Well, I was going to mention, I had asked at our last work session about discussion of ARPA funds, and Mr. Ravens had said, we were waiting for some more additional guidance from the federal government about that. But in Mr. Jennings' statement that we're going to be looking at ARPA, right? And I would hope that that would include a plan for any resident engagement, what that might look like, right? So that's just kind of what I was thinking, because as Mr. Raven said, well, we don't have final guidance, and then I got thinking, driving away from that meeting, well, we can still have community outreach without having all the final guidance and get that out of the way. So I hope that that can happen.
If we're going to do a lot of community outreach on that, I want to make sure that we have a conversation before, because I think we need to put some parameters around it. I think it's real easy for us to start spending money and on capital projects, and I want to make certain that if it is not something to renew or replace something we already have, that we're not using it to build something that then we've got to budget for new operations and maintenance. And I think that can be a trap with that money. So if need be, I want to have that conversation. Mr. Jennings?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, since Councilmember Beckman mentioned it, when in my previous job, they already allocated the first tranche. Did significant outreach to the U.S. Treasury Department. I feel as though we have a pretty good grasp of where DOT will be, and so I'd like to move forward and not necessarily even per the first tranche, not necessarily wait for Treasury's final rulemaking because they are allowing some latitude there. So, but I certainly understand this is one-time money, and you have to be incredibly careful with what you use it for.
Anything else? Do you have something?
No.
Okay. Well, with that, we are adjourned. We'll see everybody on Thursday.